Good morning. This is Barry Bryson, and I want to thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're continuing our study of the life and letters of the Apostle Peter, and today we're in Matthew chapter 17, the account of what happened on the Mount of Transfiguration, which is in all 3 synoptic Gospels. But I wanted to use Matthew's account as it follows directly on the heels of the last 2 events that we talked about. They're given in this order in Matthew's Gospel. In these conversations, so many times geography is important, and important again today. This is almost certainly happening on Mount Carmel. And Mount Carmel, until recently, and maybe still, but at the time would have been snow-capped. There would have been snow. And so, at the top of Mount Carmel, and so this very well may have happened in the snow, which is a neat thing to think about, especially thinking of the brilliance, the light, and the way the light would have been enhanced by, magnified by, a covering of snow. But it's just cool to think about Jesus in the snow. It's such an amazing event, so important, I'm sure, to Jesus. And Peter himself, with the thing that he says, which is not the right thing this time, but the wrong thing, the misguided thing. He said the wrong thing yesterday. Generates the lesson that we are to take away from this event. Okay, Matthew chapter 17, I'll be reading verses 1 through 13. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, his brother, and brought them to a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his garments became as white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. And Peter answered and said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 tabernacles here, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. And while he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And the disciples heard this, and fell on their faces, and were much afraid. And Jesus came to them, and touched them, and said, Arise, do not be afraid. And lifting up their eyes, they saw no one except Jesus alone. And they were coming down from the mountain. Jesus commanded them, saying, Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. And the disciples asked him, saying, Why did the scribes say that Elijah must come first? And he answered and said, Elijah is coming and will restore all things. But I say to you, Elijah already came, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wished. So also the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. And the disciples understood that he had spoken to them about John the Baptist. Okay, it's an amazing event. In the few minutes that we have, I want us at first to think about what this means to Jesus, the Transfiguration itself. Jesus seems to be in some way transformed and given something of a taste, an experience of who he was before he emptied himself. The event, the process that Paul talks about in Philippians chapter 2. We don't appreciate the fact that Jesus was permanently changed by coming to earth. But now he has a body. That's clear in Revelation chapter 1. That's clear in Colossians chapter 2. All of God is contained in bodily form in Jesus. Jesus did not have a body before. Now he has a body. It's a resurrection body. It's a glorious body. We see it in Revelation chapter 1. It's more glorious than the body that we see here. And there's a real strong connection to Revelation 1 because the whole falling on your face and being touched by Jesus and don't be, that all happens to John again in Revelation chapter 1. But Jesus is given a bit of an experience before everything starts to happen. That had to be so important to him, so comforting to him. It's almost like, a few days leave at home before you ship off to a war zone, to have a moment. And Moses and Elijah, they're talking to him. That's significant too. How did they recognize Moses and Elijah? They didn't have any photographs. I think there are no strangers in heaven, and I think they had a divine comprehension, perception of who these two men were. Moses and Elijah, so many connections to Jesus. Moses and Elijah and Jesus both fasted for 40 days. Moses on Mount Sinai, Elijah when he was running to Mount Sinai, Jesus when he was being tempted in the desert. All three of them, had a unique death experience. Moses was there with God and God alone, and God himself buried Moses. Elijah did not taste death, but was taken up in the whirlwind with the fiery chariots present. And then Jesus, of course, himself did die, but buried was and raised on the third day, never to die again. Moses represents the law, and Elijah the first of the prophets, other than Moses, because Moses is himself a prophet, but prophets by vocation. So we have law and the prophets there. There's so many reasons. And Peter is not talking about building temples, but building little cabins, little like they would do when they had the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles. I'll take these pine trees branches, and I'll construct 3 places where we can worship. Moses, Elijah, and you. And of course, that's the wrong thing to say. And God speaks from heaven and says almost identically what he said at Jesus' baptism, but with an added phrase. This is my son, in whom I'm well pleased. You listen to him. Quite clearly delivering the message that the law and the prophets point to the Christ. Jesus is now my communication. You listen to him. Hebrews 1:1. God in times past spoke to us, through the fathers, through the prophets, but in these last days, speaking to us through his Son. Jesus himself is God's communication. God says so with his own voice in this passage. Okay. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes, which again went to 7 minutes. But thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. Thank you so much, and we'll see you then.